For those of you who are not familiar with the product, we announced the product at the last Cloud Next in San Francisco late last year. And the product has been generally available since November of last year. The focus of today's session will be to understand the power of this product as experienced by our valued customers and explained by our partners that we are extremely lucky to have and have here with us on stage today. So today's presentation will in fact be led by some of the best partners we have in North America, talking to us about customer deployments in globally recognized large corporations. So we have a really simple agenda. I will walk you through our cloud searches in a nutshell, hand it over to partners one by one who will walk us through a series of deployments that they've had, walk us through the experience with the product, with the API, so on and so forth from that perspective. And we'll end with a few exciting product announcements, again from me. So what is Google Cloud Search? In a nutshell, we have tried to bring the power of Google to every business. Imagine being able to index everything in a company. I literally mean it, index everything in a company. That is what will ultimately allow you to bring the information that your employees in a company need as and when they need it. It puts information at their fingertips. To do that, we have to put privacy and security at the core of this offering. So a lot of innovative engineering has gone in to reflect permissions from the source in near real time into the index so that users never see content that they're not supposed to. Obviously, the whole product is powered through a lot of machine learning, from ingestion through ranking to providing answers, so on and so forth. The goal here is to bring every aspect of the convenience, scale, and speed of Google.com to every business. Peeling the onion a little bit, this is what is there in the product. At the core of it all is a permission or an ACL-sensitive index. This is not a regular content index. This maintains really rich information. It maintains interaction data. It maintains lots of extracted insights from content, signals in terms of who you are as a user, so on and so forth, to rank documents uniquely the way Google can do. To the left of this is an API. We call it the indexing API, and an SDK that we provide for indexing content from any source, on-prem, in the cloud, or SaaS applications. If you happen to be a G Suite customer, you can index this content automatically. You don't need to do any work. We just do it for you automatically. Obviously, the product is available as a standalone offering, which means you do not need to be a G Suite customer to use this product. On the right, you have a query API that allows you to implement search applications in the context of the workflow surfaces that your employees use. Core benefits, starting with the most obvious, we bring world-class search out of the box. Okay? Close to it, something that we've learned through our initial deployments and pitches is this product is truly serverless. No concept of nodes, no concept of buying more storage, no concept of figuring out how many VMs you need to spin up. This is truly serverless. Just keep indexing what you want, keep firing up applications. It just works. Hardened security that I've touched upon. We bring truly enterprise-wide search. We really invite companies to index all of the content, right? And of course, the product is internationalized, works for 100+ languages out of the box, and is compliant with standards that most enterprises care about. I would like to emphasize that the product is available as a standalone offering. Any customer, any business in the world, we invite you to try us as a product. If you're a G Suite customer, we give you the added benefit of indexing your G Suite content without any effort. But even otherwise, anybody is free and welcome to use it. The product is priced on the basis of number of documents, number of queries. And we start off with packages of various sizes. And then if you go beyond those quotas, we have a very, very simple usage-based model that kicks in after that. With that background, it's now my privilege to invite our esteemed guests today on stage, Chad Johnson from Sada, Bryan McKay from Onyx, Eric Immermann from Proficient, and Kamran from Accenture. Please come on stage. Let's give them a round of applause, please. So just to set up these gentlemen for what they're going to be covering with us today, just to give you a quick sense, each of them is going to be covering a different aspect of the product as they have experienced it. Their talk will touch upon many different aspects, but I've just called out some core aspects for each of them. Onyx will be talking to us. Bryan from Onyx will be talking to us about the rapid deployment experience they've had with the product. Eric from Proficient will be covering search relevance out of the box. Chad from Sada will be covering the benefits of having an effortless infrastructure and getting good search quality out of the box. And finally, Kamran from Accenture will be providing a very interesting perspective on how search can be used as a building block for larger, more complex content analytics solutions. With that overview, I invite Bryan to take it over from here.
Jayanth, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everybody. My name is Bryan McKay. I lead our cloud search practice within Onyx. Our company was formed in 1992, and in 2002, we became one of the first Google Enterprise partners. So we've been in the search business for a long time. Since then, we've grown significantly, both in terms of products, both in terms of products and services, as well as a company. So we have over 200 employees now. We're serving over 1,000 customers. We represent and we resell all the different products that Google has to offer, the whole product line. So we're not just search anymore, although for me and my group, it is the thing that we do. And the other thing I should mention is we are a 3-time recipient of the North American Partner of the Year. A little louder, Onyx, folks. So I've got 2 use cases that I'm going to talk about this afternoon. The first one is Philips Healthcare. And so this is a very common use case that you'll find in a lot of organizations. Some of your organizations, in fact, may have this use case. This is a field service use case. It's really field service, knowledge management, and customer support. And in 2015, they came to us with a problem. It was primarily knowledge management and customer support. And the challenge that they had was that for their service engineers, it just took far too long for them to find anything in order to be able to service their customers in the field. So within Philips, this particular group is about 5,000 field service engineers all around the world. And their job is to go into hospitals and look after the MRI machines, CT scanners, ultrasounds, et cetera, et cetera. So they've got a pretty important role out there in the field. Their challenge was they were spending evenings and weekends trying to find the information they needed so that they could service the equipment the day before they were going in to actually work with the customer, work with the equipment. It was just taking too long. They couldn't find what they needed. Sometimes they found it, sometimes they didn't. All that adds up to equipment downtime, extended downtime, and just in general, the inability to get the machines back up and running. And that was impacting some really critical metrics for the customer. You think customer satisfaction, first-time resolution, the time it takes to solve a problem, et cetera, et cetera. So working with their team, we solved that problem for them. And we were able to help their team realize some really important benefits. For example, reducing the amount of time it takes to search for information and find what they needed by 27%. And the other one, which was, I think, even more important and important for their customers, reducing the time to solve by 15%. So the time in the field was much more valuable. They got the equipment back up and running, uptime increases, et cetera, et cetera. Very important milestone for them. In 2018, they came to us with a different challenge. This time, the challenge was they had to move off of an old solution and migrate over to a new solution, and they had a very compressed timeline within which to do it. So this was a migration exercise primarily. But they had some really critical objectives. So number one, they wanted to ensure that they had a minimal footprint in the data center. Essentially, they are moving to the cloud. And not only were they moving to the cloud, the other issue they had was just the cost of implementing within the data center and the amount of time and effort it takes to implement within the data center. So the challenge there is we had to find a solution that allowed them to move to the cloud. The other one was they needed to be ready for UAT in 3 months. This is the rapid implementation part of it. And that was a very significant challenge, but I'll touch on some of the details. It was very successful. The last one is, since they were migrating from a solution, they wanted it to be transparent. No training, no retraining, and they wanted the solution to give them a search experience that was equal to or better than what they had with the previous solution. So first of all, the managed service, I can't underestimate this, that notion of a managed service. There are no servers to set up. There's no software to install, as Jayanth had mentioned. There's no nodes. You're not tuning and tweaking the search engine. It's just there. It just works. So that's the first key point. And the second one is, with a robust connector framework and APIs, we were able to actually start development remotely and help them move along a lot faster and get the deployment ready within that 3-month window and into their QA environment. The other thing we should mention is the performance of the connectors. Indexing in days, not weeks, is a really important measurement. And the last is, once the system went live, nobody really noticed. And that was a good thing, because that meant we hit the objective. That meant that we were giving them what they had, if not better. Now, when you take a look at the architecture, I do want to highlight a couple of things here. The first point is, a few years ago when we started this, almost every content source you see on this diagram that's on the left was on-premise. Over time, they were moving everything into the cloud. The other thing is, everything on the right was also on-premise. So with this implementation, what we've done is, now we didn't obviously move their content sources to the cloud, but what we've done essentially is move the entire solution out of their data center and into the cloud. The only thing that's left in the data center that we put in their data center are those green boxes. And those are the connectors themselves running on virtual machines. So that's really all that's left. I mean, that's there for security reasons and, so that it's close to the on-premise sources. But that's all that's left. Everything else has been moved to the cloud. That greatly simplifies solutions and allows us to move a lot faster. Now, this is a view of the user interface. Looks like a fairly typical enterprise search use case, but there is something here that I want to highlight, and it's really important, and that is on the left-hand side. So everything on the right looks like fairly typical, enterprise search stuff. But on the left, the thing that's really important are those filters. Within their solution, almost all of their content did not have those filters. So as we were ingesting the content, we had to add those filters. We did that in the connectors. In their previous solution, we had another system, which was a third-party offering. They analyzed the content and enriched the metadata. With these connectors and the processes that we created, we were able to add that metadata with the connectors. And that's really important, because that's how their engineers are able to find their information so quickly. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is, if I just go back, is that there are some best practices around metadata enrichment, and that's not the stuff I'm going to dig into deeply, and I know that Eric is, so I just wanted to make sure I teed that up for his conversation. The second use case I want to talk about is Whirlpool. For those of you who joined us last year on stage, who joined us last year for the launch of Cloud Search, you've heard about this use case. The thing that's really important about this use case is really it's the why it matters, right? In the engineering world, they tend to have systems, very diverse systems. In the case of Whirlpool, there's 21 different systems that they need to search. People have to find information in all these different systems. And that takes a long time. But the key here is that with a solution like this, they have a single pane of glass to search across all those systems. And so finding and reusing knowledge they've invested in is now possible. That's one of the key benefits. The other, of course, is you start to get into things like the reduction of design, or the reduction of cost of design, and the improvement of time to market. Now, a rapid implementation, as Jayanth had highlighted, is really important. And there's another key part to it that's really important, and that is how quickly now we can index content. We're seeing rates of about 12 million documents. I think the APIs are capable of about 12 million documents, in a week. At Whirlpool, we index their documents, 12 million documents in just over a week. And that's super critical because, as I'm about to show you here, there are some things we're working on next, right? In terms of significantly improving the experience for their users, which is really critical because everybody wants that Google experience. Well, now we're about to take that step. But it's the performance of the connectors that is an enabler. If you can index your content fast, that means that you're able to experiment. You're able to go and start to experiment with the metadata and the filters, the facets, the operators, and everything else. We know we didn't get that right for Whirlpool. Their users told us that, so we have work to do. And this is what allows us to get that right for the users. The other thing that we're starting to do is to introduce a really, really exciting feature, probably one of the ones that I find is the most exciting, and that is the ability to start asking your query as a question. Query interpretation or query intent. And the other one is there's a lot of documents out there in an index that have knowledge buried deep. So we want to be able to start surfacing that knowledge as an answer to a question. Those are the things that we're really looking forward to. So I just want to wrap up by letting you know that there's a few of us who are here in the audience, and afterwards we're going to be here. If you have any questions about the work that we do, our company, or the use cases, please come see us afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bryan. Thank you very much, Bryan, for that. So very quickly, we'll be now switching over to Proficient. Eric will talk about a couple of their deployments and help us understand how the search relevance out of the box and cloud search help their customers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jayanth. So my name is Eric Immermann. I'm our director of our search and content practice at Proficient. High level, Proficient is a North American-focused services integrator and software integrator who has about 3,000 consultants in North America. Our search practice has been around for about a decade now. We've done over 200 successful implementations and have around 30 search-focused clients who are consultants who are really focusing on search and AI in particular. So what I want to talk to you about today is a couple of different customers that we've worked with and how we've used Google Cloud Search to kind of improve relevance and give them a great experience out of the box. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is a large financial technology services customer, about 22,000 users of this system. So as you can see from this slide, they're looking at a broad range of content, right? So 8 different content sources, crawling websites, loading from ServiceNow or Salesforce, crawling Jive or Confluence, right? All of these are kind of heterogeneous data sources that don't all have the same metadata and information for them, and we want to give them all into a single pane of glass. Right, that single pane of glass is hosted on a SharePoint environment. It's got seamless single sign-on with Google to automatically log you in, know your preferences, know your history, and so on. And it really operates as a unified portal for all of that content. All right, so that's experience number one. Experience number two is another customer we're working with who are 350,000 users, so very large food and beverage manufacturer, right? And as part of this, we've synchronized over all of their groups and their permissions and their users, right? Where we have the ability to keep permissions on every one of these documents across thousands and thousands and thousands of groups. And then they're loading lots and lots of content in. So 21 different content sources for phase one, which is just the tip of the iceberg in this case. Things like databases, where they're loading out of their own custom applications that they've written internally. Things like the IBM suite, so FileNet and Wickham and Portal, or Documentum, or online SaaS services like GetAbstract or Books 24/7 that they use for learning. They are taking these into a bunch of different application experiences where each has a different sort of way of working. So basic level, this is something like people search, being able to find what people exist in my organization and how they relate to one another. Right? Next would be something like research library, helping their R&D folks understand what R&D they've done in the past and use that to build on top of the R&D they're going to do in the future. Unified enterprise search, once again, we're looking to combine all of these sources together and really use this as a way to accelerate the time to value of both the product and also to allow their users to very quickly find what they're looking for. Now, in both of these environments, as I've mentioned, these are kind of heterogeneous environments where there is a lot of different content that all is ranked relatively differently, right? So when you run into this scenario, a lot of times, the base way is you just say, all right, I'm just going to look at the content, content's equivalent across all these, let's search by content, but that doesn't always provide the best experience. As Jayanth mentioned before, there's lots of signals that can be used by these engines to help influence relevance, the context behind that content. So something like, when was a document created, or is there a good description of the content, or does it have tags or labels or keywords? All of these things are pieces that can be provided into the picture to give a better relevance out of the box than just simply looking at content and understanding what's there. In a lot of search platforms, so a lot of the open source ones or other competitive platforms, the way that you do this and the way you integrate this content is via the query end of the matter, right? Essentially, they're what's known as schema-less systems. So I throw all of my data into the system, it figures out what types of fields everything is, and then when I'm querying, when I'm doing that interface, I'm essentially tuning and tweaking and saying, okay, for content source A, title is very important. Content source B, description is important. Content source C, maybe nothing is. And this is going to happen in every organization, because you might have a website or a system that's run by marketing, and there's been SEO out the wazoo done on it, and you really have very good content, whereas something else might be user-created content where the only reason they're putting a description is because it's required for them to upload the content in the first place, right? You get very different strength signals out of those two different scenarios. So in this model, when you're adding additional data sources, you're essentially getting almost an exponential sort of problem, right? The more applications I have, the more data sources I have, the more complex that logic has to be, the more I have to work to really understand all the different pieces of data that I'm ingesting. With Google Cloud Search, however, we do it a little bit differently. So we design the relevance up front by designing a schema and specifying, A, what type of data is in the system, right? So my field might be a string, an integer, a date, and so on. That's the simple stuff. Then we go and we can do and say, this is how important that field is. So at a field-by-field level within the data source, we can provide relevancy context that Google's algorithms can use to say, oh, in this data source, I really care about the description or the title or maybe the keywords or the tags, right? After that, we can then provide operators. And operators are essentially a shortcut for how do users know this field, right? So that Google's natural languaging can take that and really understand, okay, when the user says they're searching for a document with a description of blank, okay, let me rewrite that query to understand here's the type and description is one of the fields, so let's rewrite the query to make it more accurate for the user, even though they didn't know how to write that query themselves. Okay? This all takes the onus of driving relevancy out of the query end and puts it at the data source end, which is honestly a better area to do it simply because a lot of times the people who know their data best are the owners of those data sources. So we're looking to kind of upfront define this so that I can go and combine later and I don't have to go and kind of retune everything after the fact. I just have great out-of-the-box relevancy. So beyond that, now we have the case where there's multiple applications I may want to load, right? So I might have an engineering search. I might have an enterprise search. Engineering search, maybe I care a lot more about GitHub or Bitbucket or Jira, right? The general enterprise search, I might care about my policies or, what's the cafeteria menu. In both of those, I can have the same data sources index and use both of those in both searches, but different importances are going to be there based on which search the user is coming from. Google Cloud Search allows us to, out of the box via just a toggle, turn on whether a data source is available for an application. And then B, we can kind of go and set the importance for that data source as part of the application itself. So for engineering search, maybe I don't care about policies as much as I care about source code. For enterprise search, maybe I don't care about source code as much as I care about policies. Very simple little tweaks we can do in order to tweak the relevance out after the fact without having to go and change my queries and change my logic and so on. Combined with the machine learning and personalization, this really gives us the ability to have a great out-of-the-box relevance and a really great experience and quick time to value for users getting a beneficial product into their environment. Okay? So I appreciate everybody's time today. If anybody wants to come learn more about this or talk with me, my contact information on the screen. My colleague Joe is also here if you'd like to talk, and it's been great talking with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eric, for that overview. Now over to Chad from Sada to talk to us about a very interesting use case where the product has been used for an external search problem.
All right, thanks everybody. I am the Director of Enterprise Search at Sada. Sada was founded about 19 years ago, and we were one of Google's original launch partners with their Enterprise Partner Program. At this point, we have been a multi-year recipient of their Partner of the Year awards. We cover all of the Google Cloud Suite, all of the product lines. Within Sada, I run our search practice. We have a team that implements projects just like this. We help customers figure out how Google Cloud Search can meet their needs, and then we take the project all the way through to implementation. We take a very custom approach to each project, and I've been doing this for about 10 years now with enterprise search, and really enjoy all of the different industries that we get to bring search into. There's a lot of things that are common across all the projects, but each one has something, it has a story, it has something that's interesting. And I want to tell you about one of those projects today. And this was the first time that I've worked in this particular slice of this type of search project. We partnered with a company called Avenue Insights and Analytics, and Avenue is a public sector focused solution provider, and they developed an application called SuperIndex. SuperIndex is essentially a search on top of real property records for counties across the United States. In particular, for this project, we were working with Oakland County, Michigan. SuperIndex is interesting because we've probably all had this problem. We've tried to find something on our local government's websites, and maybe they restrict what we can search, maybe they restrict how we can search, when we can search. Oakland County has made this very accessible to the residents of their county. Documents are scanned and run through an optical character recognition process so that the entire mortgage or deed or lien is searchable. Metadata is extracted from those documents and entered through the registrar's office. And at this point, the data comes out in a structured format. It was, I'm not even sure what it was stored in, to be honest, but it came into a connector that we developed using Google's software development kit for cloud search. So within just a couple of weeks, we were able to take in massive amounts of data from these feeds coming in with the full text of all of the mortgage documents, all of the deeds, all the liens. The metadata comes in. There were over 75 different properties and attributes for each of these. Grantor names, subdivision names, the year that the property was built. You can imagine there was I had to have a large spreadsheet just to keep track of all the different attributes and fields for all these documents. We designed a schema, just like Eric talked about, to map all of these to different data types, to have different importance levels for the different fields. All of this was fed up into Google Cloud in a secure index. Security is obviously not super important for a public site search, but this is a solution that Avenue deploys to many different counties. So we don't want one county to accidentally be searching somebody else's records. So there is still security and silos even in a public search. On the right-hand side, you'll see that the output is basically a search results page. I'll show you a larger picture of this in just a second. But there's also an interesting alternative use of the search on the output end. We maybe not have all had this happen to us, but it can happen where property records might be filed maliciously. Maybe someone tries to steal a property or tries to do something with bad intent. Oakland County and the SuperIndex allows the residents of the county to register for alerts that let them know if new documents are added to the system with something in their query. They can be fairly arbitrary in the way they specify this. They don't have to put just their name. Maybe their name is, John Smith, and that's too broad. So maybe they want to be able to search by their address or by the subdivision to narrow the search. If any new documents are added, they get an alert. Every night, the system runs those searches automatically. You register with your email address, and you'll get a nice email letting you know if anything new was added. It's a great proactive system to prevent fraud and at least detect it early. So let me show you a little bit more about the interface. This is a quite a complicated search screen. There's a lot of different ways that the user can filter the search. We have the facets down the left-hand side, like Bryan talked about. We have the different sorting and filtering options. Within the search results themselves, in the center, there's a preview of the document, so they can see the first page of the document. They can then purchase and order full copies of the document through an additional process. But at least they can tell if they found the right document. There's a lot of metadata that's shown for each search result, and it's Cloud Search that's returning all of that metadata. We put in those 75 fields. We indicate which ones we want to come back in the search results. There's no limit. We can have as many of them come back as we want. The application renders them in various panels, and there's things that expand and contract and let the user verify that they have found the right document before they purchase it. This is a public site, as Jayanth mentioned. It is at ocmideeds.com, which we've included on the slides if anyone wants to check it out, and it is publicly accessible. The second interface that I talked about was the alerts. This is a pretty simple interface where the user types in a couple of keywords at the top. The system automatically runs the search every night, keeping track of any new results. So it's noticing that maybe yesterday that search returned 4 results, today it returned 5. It sends an email to let us know that a new document has been added. And if it's something you didn't authorize, you could do something about it. So the biggest reason that Avenue implemented Google Cloud Search was that they are not search engineers. They are not search experts. But they wanted Google quality results without a lot of work. They get that with Google Cloud Search. They know that their users will be familiar with the system. It will work like Google. It's become that verb that we all use. And that's what they wanted. They didn't want to build their own. They didn't want to design their own. They just wanted to implement a service that provided very good quality results right out of the box. In terms of infrastructure, they were having some pain points. There was a lot of infrastructure to manage their own search engine. They were having interruptions and downtimes during certain maintenance changes. They would load a new schema, they would push a large batch of data, and they would occasionally have downtime during those changes. Google Cloud Search has eliminated those for them. And finally, the schema did support the robustness that they needed. It had, like I said, quite a few attributes, a lot of different filtering and sorting and faceting capabilities. We were able to accommodate all of that for them. In terms of performance and achievements, we did index over 13 million records. It took approximately 2 days. These were not very large records. They weren't 100-page PDFs, but they were there was a lot of data, there was a lot of metadata, the full OCR text of every document, and we were able to run, I want to say that we were more the bottleneck than Cloud Search was. We parallelized the indexing, meaning we had multiple instances running in parallel, and we were not hitting the quotas that Google imposed. We were way under the thresholds, so I'm optimistic that if we ever need to index even more than this, that with the right infrastructure and the right planning on our part, I think we're always going to be the bottleneck, not Google, in terms of indexing performance. We are still getting approximately 1 second per query, which is a great execution time. It's fast enough that users don't notice it. Response, feels nearly instantaneous. And in terms of an implementation, my team was able to achieve this in about 8 weeks, start to finish, which I think is fabulous. It was, as Eric said, sort of a rip and replace. It was swapping out the old for the new. But that's what we do a lot, and we just want to make sure that it's as transparent and as seamless as it can be for the customer. Lastly, I just wanted to give a little first-person quote here from Lisa Braun, who is Oakland County's Register of Deeds and clerk. And it gives a little bit of the history of why this is important, why this used to be difficult, why it was a struggle, even going back into the 1800s, and the way that records used to be recorded in ledgers and could only be looked up certain ways. So from Lisa, traditionally online land records databases are limited to searching pre-indexed fields like grantor and grantee. Now, with SuperIndex, Oakland County's Google Cloud Search-based solution, users have the flexibility to search our records by any term and in one of the 5 languages that we offer. This enables us to accommodate our diverse population. Superindex is user-friendly and in the Google format that people are familiar with. I just wanted to give a shout out. Lisa has joined us in the audience today. I want to thank you for traveling in. If you have any questions about this, she's very passionate about the benefits of this solution, and we look forward to more partnerships with Avenue and with Oakland County. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chad. Thank you so much, Chad. As the last speaker, but not the least important, it's Accenture. Kamran will be covering a very interesting set of deployments, but also walking us through how Accenture sees search as a building block into a much larger content intelligence kind of a play in a lot of emerging use cases. Over to you, Kamran.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayanth, and thank you, everybody, for attending this session. Really appreciate the chance to speak to you today. As Jayanth mentioned, I'm going to talk about 3 things principally. The first is quick background on where my group, the Search and Content Analytics group, which is effectively the search practice inside of Accenture, where we sit and how we interface with the rest of the organization there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the assets that we built to help deploy search solutions, and particularly cloud search. One of those is in an interesting area that I think is going to be more prevalent in the future. And then I'll really quickly touch on 3 use cases that we've implemented over the years. First off, I have been at Accenture for about 19 months now, and I came to Accenture by way of an acquisition. I was the founder and CEO of Search Technologies, which was a small-ish search consulting firm that grew to about 200 people, and we were acquired by Accenture about 18 months ago, and so now we're 460,000 people. That's an interesting exercise. So today, we're still focused on search, but we're also focused on content analytics, which is really what Google calls document understanding. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But we've been working with Google for many, many years as Search Technologies and now as Accenture. We have many engineers, not unlike these guys, who are trained in all the aspects of Google Cloud Search. The thing that I like, and the reason that we were acquired by Accenture, is that the projects that we're doing are really smaller components of very large projects that use many other assets that Google has today. So search typically is part of a much larger implementation. So we have access to all of those groups and all of those customers now through Accenture. Let me talk a bit about assets. When we were at Search Technologies, we found that implementing search really required us to build accelerators. And one of those key accelerators was in the area of content ingestion. I think most people here have heard about connectors. So we built a framework that we call Aspire that has 40 or so connectors that in some cases overlap with the Google connectors, but in some cases are complementary because there are so many different document sources out there. So we have all of these connectors available, and I'll talk about some customers that are using them. And we're maintaining these and building some great solutions with some, or in some cases, all of these. At Accenture, we have 50 content sources that's powering the intranet for 460,000 people. So that's the first set of assets I wanted to talk about. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through every box here, but what I wanted to talk about was this area of document understanding. If I look at the projects that we're involved with today at Accenture, the vast majority are search use cases, the ones that we've heard about, ones that I'm going to talk about. But there's a new growing use case that we call content analytics or document understanding. And this is where, rather than focusing on search, we're using natural language processing to understand documents. Once we can understand documents, which is effectively tagging them so that we've got much richer metadata, we can do many, many things with that content. We can put it into a knowledge graph. we can index it with search, which is what I think most people are going to do. But we can start to build solutions that are not search-like. Search and match is a good example. We have a customer where we're matching jobs to resumes automatically by understanding those documents. We've got a customer we're working on right now where we're routing mail that's coming in, 35 million pieces of mail. We understand that mail and we send it to the right department or the right person. So document understanding, I think, is going to be a very, very large area. With that in mind, Google has launched the Google Natural Language API, which in my opinion goes hand in hand with search. The other asset, which is in the yellow box that we've implemented, or we've built and we've just released, is a product called Sada. And rather than go into detail about it, I'll just say that it's a business users interface to help you build NLP applications. So if you want to build an NLP application today, you're going to use Python. You're going to have data scientists who are going to build that algorithm using some of the algorithms from Google, and you're going to implement that as a model. Saga enables business users to use a drag-and-drop interface and effectively have the code written for you. So it's meant to democratize access to this document understanding API from Google, which we can then blend with Google Cloud Search. So my own point of view is that search and natural language processing have always gone together, and I think that they will come together more and more, and we'll see much more powerful use cases as time goes on. Let me really quickly touch on 3 different case studies. So this is an automotive client that we've been working with, and the interesting thing about this is it's a dealer extranet. So rather than the intranet, which is also powered by Google Cloud Search, they wanted to build a brand new extranet for thousands of their dealers. And so this was a big multi-million-dollar digital transformation project. So they're migrating the CRM, which was Adobe Experience Manager, from on-premise into the cloud, and my colleagues at Accenture are doing that. And we fit exactly in the middle. So search is a critical component to this extranet. So we've been working with this larger team hand in hand to implement the Google Cloud Search solution. We had to use some of our connectors, some of Google's connectors, but we also had to build a new connector for Adobe Experience Manager in the cloud. So the integration of our connector with Google Cloud Search was particularly interesting part of the project. But I would say if one thing I had to pick out of this project, it's the integration with security. So this particular customer is using the IBM Tivoli product, and we were able to integrate Google Cloud Search with that, and that was a key component of this. So I would say that the security aspects of Google Cloud Search were really important in this particular area. The second customer, video gaming customer, I'm guessing that you probably know who these customers are, except the first one. I'll give you a clue. They're on 2 wheels, not 4. The second one is a video gaming company, an enterprise search application, your traditional enterprise search, but many different content sources, including Maps, that they're using for their CRM. SharePoint, both on-premise and online, and again, we were using the connectors, but the key thing about this was relevancy. They really needed strict relevancy and personalization. So a marketing person in Austin needs to be served up with content that's more relevant to them from the content sources than other documents. And so that was a key component. And the relevancy model within Cloud Search really allowed us to do that very well. Again, Aspire was used here as an asset to help us accelerate the development here. We went live, and this is going to be, I think, a very large implementation. And just finally, a large aerospace client, commercial. There's only 2 of them, so you have a 50-50 chance. I'll give you a better clue. They're not in the news for the wrong reason at the moment. So this is a big project. This company has moved from Microsoft over to the entire G Suite, and it's a massive transformation for this organization. And so we're now implementing Google Cloud Search. We're at the concept stage because the G Suite migration is taking a lot of time, and we're doing all kinds of different proofs of concepts. And the one that I'd say that is really interesting is we're using the people search capability, and that's working really well. But what we're going to do is we're going to start using that same capability, but we're going to use it for parts so that we can do some entity extraction. And this is a perfect example of where we're going to start with search, but we're going to layer the Google API, the NLP API on top, because the document understanding requirement at this customer is enormous. And when we connect that together with search, it's going to be a very, very powerful system. They use a knowledge graph today, so they want to get the Google-style answer when they put questions in to the intranet across the whole of G Suite. So that's really the three things I wanted to say. I just, I'd close by saying that for me, I think Google Cloud Search is a very powerful product. And when you combine that with the Google NLP API, I think you're going to be, well, I'm already surprised. I think I'm going to be more surprised about the kinds of things that we'll be able to do with those two products together. So thank you, and we'll be here at the booth if anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Kamran, for that, and thank you, all the panelists. Just to summarize, we heard use cases of rapid deployment with Philips and Whirlpool, amongst other benefits that Bryan from Onyx walked us through. Eric, thanks for that great description of how search relevance was really useful and how you could improve search relevance by playing around with the structured data fields. External intranet, effortless infrastructure, speed of ingestion, all of that. Thank you so much, Chad. And thanks for that really nice presentation on how NLP and cloud search could come together. We'll move to the last section of today's presentation because I tend to speak better when I stand, I'll stand. So I have some really exciting announcements about the product to make as we close the session today. First, moving into general availability, starting today, a whole new set of machine learning-based models are beginning to kick. So what sorts of impact are we seeing? We have been doing lots of experiments on these models internally, and we are really pleased to say that we are seeing a greater than 20% improvement in the mean reciprocal score. For those of you who are not familiar with that metric, it roughly measures how frequently does a user see the results within the top 5 positions. Like, it's a measure of how correctly do we pick the results that matter the most. 15% lift in successful searches. We know successful searches when people have actually clicked on a link and are spending time on the link, so we know that the search was successful. 15% lift. Almost 20% drop in abandoned sessions. And along with that, an almost 30% reduction in queries where users do not find any results. Because we are a relevance ranked engine, we, of course, think that noisy results are just as bad as poorly ranked results. So we actually don't show results when we are not sure. The way we increased the coverage is by getting more intelligent and aggressive with regards to retrieval of content by applying a lot of machine learning when it comes to knowledge understanding, language understanding, content understanding, and being able to retrieve results more aggressively than otherwise. So we're really pleased about these results. These search quality experiments take a lot of discipline. So we've been experimenting these for a while, and we hope that with these improvements, customers will see an even better experience out of the box with cloud search. Second, there was a reference to a feature called People Search. We are calling it Google Directory, and this is going to be available as a beta. It is going to come both with a UI and an API. So as was explained by one of the panelists, you can use the query API in Cloud Search to retrieve results about people in your organization. In addition to providing this API-based access, this will be packaged as an additional benefit, as an additional service that you get as part of G Suite, and we call this Google Directory. So here is a screenshot of what you're likely to see. You'll be able to see both the organizational hierarchy that a person comes from, navigate up and down, but also we are super excited that you will be able to understand more about what a person works on. Double-click into that, see who else works on the same topic areas, because teams have become far more fluid these days, and more on this will be coming on the G Suite side moving forward. So we invite those of you who are interested in being part of a beta for this product at this short link, and of course take pictures, but this whole presentation will be online as well. We'll be selectively rolling out the beta based on the demand. We are seeing a lot of demand for this feature from customers. So we'll be rolling it out to get feedback from a lot of you. So we encourage you all to sign up for this beta. With that, my presentation for the day is complete. Thank you all very much. One couple of notes for all of you to keep in mind. One is when it comes to people search, like any search product, you're only going to find information that you index. So there is something called the Google Cloud Directory Sync that all customers have access to. If you're a G Suite customer, you have to go ahead and configure that so that you index more information. Because what you can find is a function of what you've indexed in. So that's one obvious point, but I'm just calling it out because it's important to note. It's not like there's no magic to finding information that's not there in the index. That's yet to be invented. The other part here is that for those of you who are curious about the search quality metrics, we have also published an article that walks you through how Google Cloud Search actually does ranking. It's turned out to be a topic of general interest for a lot of people. So please go to google.com and look for Google Cloud Search ranking, how, so on and so forth. I'm sure you'll find the article. And thank you very much for all of your interest today. We encourage you all to sign up, talk to our partners who are all here. Thank you all for your time and sharing your stories. Thank you very much.